I never thought that at this point in my life, the biggest battle I'd face wouldn't be with age or illness, but with my own family. I've worked hard my entire life, built a home brick by brick, and raised my children with all the love a man could give. I never imagined that one day, that same home would be the place where my presence would be treated like an inconvenience. It all started quietly. A whisper here, a sigh there. But behind every forced smile, I could feel it.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.
I wasn't wanted anymore. When my wife passed away, the house felt cold, even during the summer. It wasn't just the creaky floors or the empty chair at the end of the dining table. It was the silence that sat heavy on my chest, reminding me every day that the woman I'd shared my life with was gone. My daughter, who lived with her husband and 2 kids, suggested I move in with them. "So you won't be alone, Dad," she had said, her voice sweet and comforting. And back then, it felt like love. I packed what was left of my world and moved in. For the first few months, it was nice. The grandkids would run to me when they got home from school, and their laughter filled the halls the way my wife's voice once had. I'd make pancakes in the morning, help them with homework in the afternoon, and tell them bedtime stories at night. I'd built a life around being useful, around still feeling needed. I thought I had found a second chapter to a life I thought was ending. But slowly, things began to change. It started with little comments. "Dad, maybe you shouldn't cook so much. The kitchen gets messy." Or, "Could you not leave your slippers by the couch? The kids trip over them." At first, I laughed it off. I told myself she was just stressed, that with 2 kids and a job, she was just tired. But soon, the tone shifted from gentle to sharp. The warmth in her voice faded. I wasn't her father in those moments. I was a burden. One night, after dinner, I overheard her talking to her husband in the kitchen. I didn't mean to listen, but the walls in that house carried every word like a loudspeaker. "We can't keep living like this," she whispered, though her frustration made it sound louder than any scream. "He's everywhere. He's always in the living room. I need my space. This is our house now, not his." Our house, not his. I sat in the dark, clutching the armrest of the recliner I'd bought for myself decades ago. My heart ached, not from old age, but from something far worse. How quickly they forget. How quickly a man can become invisible in the very place he helped build. The next morning, she came to me with a forced smile, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. "Dad," she began, "maybe it's time you thought about other arrangements. You know, somewhere where you can be around people your age. Somewhere quiet, peaceful." I knew what she meant. She meant a nursing home. I stared at her, and for the first time I didn't recognize my own daughter. She stood there, shifting uncomfortably, pretending to care but unable to hide the impatience burning underneath her skin. I wanted to ask her, where did my little girl go? The one who used to run to me when she scraped her knees? The one I used to carry on my shoulders at the county fair? But I said nothing. I just nodded and went to my room. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. Every creak of the house felt like it was talking back to me, reminding me of every nail I had hammered, every wall I had painted. This wasn't just a building. This was my legacy. And somewhere along the way, I had allowed myself to be treated like a guest. But what my daughter didn't know, what she had clearly forgotten, was that the deed to this house was still in my name. I bought it decades ago with my bare hands and calloused palms. I paid every mortgage payment, repaired every broken pipe, and rebuilt the porch after every storm. It was mine long before she ever moved back in with her family. I remembered the night she came crying to me years ago, when her marriage was falling apart. She and her husband were on the brink of losing everything. I opened my door, my home, and said, "This house will always be your home too." But I never gave it away. I simply let them live here. I wanted them safe. I never thought they'd use that kindness against me. The next few days were cold. My daughter barely spoke to me unless she needed something. Her husband avoided me like I was a ghost. Even the grandkids seemed distant, as if they could sense the tension but didn't understand it. And me, I went on pretending everything was fine, because that's what fathers do. We pretend we're not hurting. We keep silent, not because we're weak, but because we love too much to start a war. But love has limits, even for an old man like me. And the day I realized I'd had enough wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet. I was sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. The same porch where my wife and I used to drink iced tea on summer evenings. My daughter came out, holding her phone, her voice low but not low enough. She was talking to someone. "Yeah, I think I'm gonna start looking at those places this week. He's getting slower, and I can't do this anymore. It's time." She didn't even see me sitting there. She didn't see the tears welling in my eyes. She didn't see the storm quietly rising in the heart of an old man who had sacrificed everything for the people he loved. In that moment, I made a silent promise to myself. If they didn't want me here, they were about to find out whose house they were really living in. I wasn't going to scream or beg for a place in my own home. I had lived through wars, layoffs, and burying the love of my life. I wasn't going to let my own daughter treat me like an unwanted guest. This old man still had a few surprises left.
The following morning, I walked through the house slowly. Not because my knees ached like they usually did, but because I wanted to see everything. Every corner, every picture on the wall, every creak in the wood. It was mine, all of it. And it was strange how something you've owned for so long can suddenly feel like a stranger's home when the people inside stop seeing you as family. My daughter moved around the kitchen, avoiding my eyes as if making breakfast was suddenly the most urgent task in the world. Her husband gave me that polite nod, the kind people give to neighbors they barely know. I sat down at the table like I always did, but the chair didn't feel the same. I reached for the coffee pot, but it wasn't there anymore. They'd moved it to a different counter. A small thing, but it stung. Little by little, they'd been rearranging everything. Not just the furniture, my place in this house, too. I poured myself a cup of coffee and listened. They talked around me, never to me. My presence was tolerated, not welcomed. After breakfast, my daughter cleared her throat. She was nervous, I could tell. She'd always had this little habit when she had something unpleasant to say. She looked at her husband, then at me. "Dad," she started softly, "we've been thinking. Maybe it's time to talk about what's next for you." I didn't answer. I wanted her to say it. I wanted her to have the courage to tell me to my face that she wanted me gone. She continued, her voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed but not cruel. "We just think maybe you'd be happier in a place where you can get the care you need. A nice place with people your age. You'd have your own space. You deserve that." I smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the kind of smile you give when someone's stabbing you and you refuse to let them see it hurts. "And what about this place?" I asked calmly. She shifted her weight. Her husband stared down at his plate. "Well, we'd stay here, of course. It's home, but we'll visit. You'll see the kids all the time." I nodded slowly. "I see," I said. But what they didn't know, what they'd clearly forgotten, was that I wasn't some old man who had stumbled into their lives. This was my home before they ever showed up. I paid for every wall and every window. When the roof leaked, I climbed up there myself. When the furnace broke, I fixed it. When my daughter came here crying years ago with her kids, I opened my doors without hesitation. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
I gave them shelter when they had nowhere else to go. But now, suddenly, I was a problem that needed to be moved. Later that day, I went to my room and opened the small wooden box I kept on the top shelf of my closet. Inside were old papers, a few photographs, and the original deed to the house. My name was right there in bold letters, not hers, not her husband's, mine. I ran my finger over the ink like it was a reminder of who I was, of everything I had built. I wasn't just some old man with a cane and fading memories. I was the man who gave them a roof over their heads. I sat there for a long time, the afternoon light slipping through the curtains, warming the old floorboards beneath my feet. Part of me wanted to confront her right then and there, slam the papers down on the kitchen table, and watch the color drain from her face. But I didn't. No. I had learned long ago that silence can be louder than shouting. That night, they were talking in their bedroom again. I didn't have to strain to hear them. The house carried sound like a river carries leaves. "He's not going to like it," her husband said. "He doesn't have a choice. We can't keep living like this. I love him, but this isn't working. I need my house back." Her house. I felt the words like a knife twisting in my chest. I built this house for my family. I never imagined the day would come when someone who came crying to me for help would call it hers. But the pain quickly turned into something else. Something quiet. Something cold. Determination. I decided to start gathering everything. Documents, bank statements, property tax records, every proof of ownership I had. I went down to the basement the next morning and pulled out old file boxes, the same ones I'd stacked neatly years ago. Dust covered everything, but the papers were still in perfect order. My late wife used to joke that I was too organized for my own good. But that habit, that discipline, was about to come in handy. As I flipped through each paper, memory after memory hit me. The day we signed the mortgage, the first Christmas in this house, the night we brought our daughter home from the hospital. This house wasn't just wood and nails, it was a lifetime. It was everything. The next few days, I watched them carefully. They didn't know what I was planning, and I didn't give them a hint. My daughter was busy looking up senior communities on her phone when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Her husband was already talking about repainting the guest room, my room. They'd made up their minds, but they forgot something. They didn't make the rules here. I did. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to remind them, gently but firmly, of the truth. One evening, while they were sitting in the living room, I walked in with the old wooden box in my hands. I sat down slowly, placed it on the coffee table, and opened it. The papers were neatly stacked inside. I said, "We need to talk." My daughter froze, her phone still in her hand. Her husband looked like someone had just told him the roof was about to cave in. I've been hearing a lot about how I should start thinking about my future, but I think it's time you remember the past. I slid the house deed toward them. The silence that followed was thick and heavy. My daughter blinked, as if trying to process what she'd just heard. Her husband's face went pale. "Dad, what are you talking about?" she finally whispered. "I'm talking about the fact that I built this house. I paid for this house. I've owned this house for decades, and you live here because I let you, not the other way around." Her lips parted, but no words came out. And for the first time in a long time, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Not pity, not frustration, but fear. I leaned back in my chair, calm and collected, and said quietly, "If you want me gone so badly, you might want to think about where you're going to live next." She didn't say a word at first. Her husband glanced at her, waiting for her to speak, but her lips just trembled. The silence stretched between us like a tightrope ready to snap. I kept my eyes on them, not with anger, but with a steadiness they couldn't ignore. I had spent years being quiet, allowing them to move around me like I was some piece of furniture. But now they were forced to look at me, not as an old man who had outlived his time, but as the owner of the house they'd built their lives in. Her husband finally cleared his throat, trying to sound calm. I think there's some misunderstanding," he stammered. "We just meant you'd be more comfortable somewhere with more care." "Care?" I repeated softly. "You mean out of your way. I've lived here since before you were even in the picture. This house was mine before you two ever thought of calling it home." She finally spoke then, her voice shaky but laced with that familiar edge of entitlement I had begun to recognize. "Dad, that was a long time ago. Things are different now. We've been living here for years, raising our kids here. This is our home, too." I leaned forward slightly, my hands clasped together. "You're home because I let you live here. Don't confuse kindness with obligation." My words weren't loud, but they carried a weight she couldn't ignore. I saw it in the way her shoulders stiffened, in the way her husband avoided my gaze. "I'm not trying to be cruel," she continued, her voice cracking a little, "but it's not easy living with someone your age. You need help, and we have our own lives, our own responsibilities. I just thought—" "You thought I'd quietly disappear, that I'd pack up and move to some facility so you could live here without the old man in the way." Her husband rubbed the back of his neck, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. My daughter's eyes glistened, but it wasn't guilt, it was frustration. She wasn't used to me standing my ground. She was used to me saying yes, to me sacrificing whatever I had so she could feel comfortable. I stood up slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle on my shoulders like an old coat. "I want me gone? Fine. But this isn't your house to take. I've given enough, and I've been silent long enough." She tried to speak again, but I raised a hand, not in anger, but with finality. "For years I've given and given, thinking love would be enough to keep this family together. But love doesn't mean erasing myself for your comfort. You want me out? You'll have to walk out first." Her husband finally stepped forward, his voice low but pleading. "Come on, let's not make this ugly. We're family." I looked at him with a calm that seemed to unnerve him. Family is supposed to protect one another, not push each other out when it's inconvenient. The room fell quiet again. I could hear the faint ticking of the wall clock behind me. She was trying to hold on to her pride, but I could see the cracks forming in her expression. It was the first time in a long time she didn't have control over the situation. I walked over to the window, looking out at the yard I'd spent years tending to. The oak tree near the fence was taller now, its branches reaching wide. My wife used to love sitting under it in the summer. I had spent afternoons building a tire swing there for my daughter when she was just a little girl. She used to laugh so loudly it would echo through the neighborhood. And now the same girl who used to beg me to push her higher on that swing was looking at me like I was an obstacle. I turned back to face her. "Do you remember that tree? How many times you'd fall asleep on that swing after school? Do you remember who fixed the roof when it collapsed that winter storm? Who paid the bills when you had nothing?" Her eyes flickered with emotion, but pride is a stubborn thing. "That doesn't change the fact that we live here now," she said weakly. "No," I said quietly, "but it does remind you of whose shoulders you stood on to get here." She swallowed hard. Her husband stepped closer to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. I could see they were struggling to figure out their next move. They had been so sure that I'd just accept whatever they said, that I'd quietly move aside like some old piece of furniture they no longer needed. They hadn't counted on me reminding them that the ground they stood on was mine. I went to my room that night with a strange calmness in my chest. For the first time in months, I felt like I had air to breathe. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't some fragile old man they could brush aside. I was the man who built the foundation they walked on. But I also knew this wasn't over. Pride is a dangerous thing. It makes people do foolish things. And my daughter? She had inherited more of my stubbornness than I ever realized. 2 days later, I came home from the grocery store to find boxes in the hallway. Not mine. Theirs. She was packing. I stood in the doorway, watching silently. As she shoved clothes into suitcases, frustration etched across her face. Her husband was pacing, clearly uncomfortable with the whole thing. "Where are you going?" I asked quietly. She didn't look at me at first. She just kept folding clothes. "If you want the house so badly," she finally said, her voice tight, "then have it. We'll find somewhere else to live. We don't need to stay here and feel like guests." I took a slow breath. "You were never guests. You were my family. I let you live here because I love you. But that love doesn't mean I'll let you throw me away." She finally met my eyes. Hers were red. She wasn't crying yet, but she was close. "You made your choice, Dad." "No," I said softly. "I made my stand." Her husband tried to mediate, his voice uneasy. "Maybe we can talk about this," but she cut him off. She had already made up her mind. Pride had won over reason. She grabbed her keys, walked past me, and slammed the door behind her. I stood in the quiet house staring at the door she had just walked out of. I had won the battle, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like something heavy settling in my chest. I loved my daughter, but sometimes love isn't enough when pride blinds people. As the night fell, I sat in the living room with the old wooden box beside me. I didn't regret standing my ground. I wasn't going to be pushed out of my own home. But deep down, I also knew this story wasn't finished yet. Family ties don't break this easily. They bend, they strain, and sometimes they hurt. But they also have a way of coming around when truth sinks in. And something told me, sooner or later, the weight of what she'd done would come back to her.
Days passed in a silence that wrapped itself around the house like a heavy fog. Without the sound of my daughter's footsteps in the hallway, without the chatter of the kids, without the occasional slammed cupboard door from her husband when he thought I wasn't listening, the house felt bigger than ever. It was strange. For years, I'd felt invisible in my own home, and now that it was just me, I could feel every inch of it breathing again. But that quiet came with a different kind of ache. Not the sting of being unwanted, but the dull, steady throb of what's been lost. I walked through the rooms, and everything still smelled like them. Her perfume lingered in the air upstairs. The kids' drawings were still taped to the fridge. Their laughter still echoed faintly in my head when I passed the living room. It didn't matter how angry I was. I loved them. And love, no matter how bruised, leaves a mark. The neighbors started asking questions. One afternoon, a woman from across the street stopped me on the porch. "I haven't seen your daughter or the kids lately," she said with gentle curiosity. "Everything all right?" I forced a small smile. They needed some space. We all did. She nodded, but there was that look in her eyes. The one that said she'd heard whispers. Small towns don't keep secrets for long. I didn't care about gossip, but I did care about the fact that my own daughter had walked away without looking back. At night, I sat in the old armchair by the fireplace, the same spot I used to sit in with my wife. I'd run my fingers along the worn fabric and remember the way she used to rest her head on my shoulder. She always said the house would never feel cold as long as family filled it. She was right. Without them, the walls were still strong, the roof still held, but the house felt colder than winter air. About 2 weeks after they left, the phone rang. I wasn't expecting it, and for a moment I almost didn't pick up. But something told me to answer. Her voice was soft, hesitant. "Dad?" It was the first time I'd heard her say my name since the night everything fell apart. "Yes," I said simply. There was a long pause. I could hear noise in the background. Kids, traffic, some distant shouting. It didn't sound like the home she left behind. Can we talk?" she finally asked. I leaned back in the chair, my heart tight but steady. We can talk. She showed up the next afternoon, alone. No husband, no kids. She stood at the porch like a stranger who wasn't sure if she was welcome. For a moment, I almost saw her as she used to be. A little girl clutching a school bag, nervous about something she'd done wrong. I opened the door without saying a word and stepped aside to let her in. She walked through the house slowly, like she was trying to remember every inch of it. She paused at the living room, glanced at the oak tree outside the window, then turned toward me. "It feels different," she whispered. "It feels empty." I corrected quietly. She bit her lip. "I didn't mean for it to get this bad, Dad. I thought I was doing what was best for everyone." What was best for everyone, or what was easiest for you? She bit her lip. She didn't answer because she knew the truth. I didn't say it to be cruel. I said it because someone needed to. She sank onto the couch, and for the first time since the day she tried to push me out, I saw her walls begin to crack. I made a mistake. I thought I could handle everything, but I can't. The place we're staying in isn't home. The kids cry every night, and She paused, her voice shaking. "I can't sleep. I keep hearing your voice in my head. I keep seeing this house." I didn't rush to forgive her. I sat down across from her, my hands resting on my knees. "This house was never just wood and bricks. It's where the mother and I built a life. It's where I raised you. It's where your children grew up. It's a part of us. And you wanted me to leave it like it meant nothing." Tears welled in her eyes. She wiped at them quickly, the way she used to when she was a teenager, trying to act tough. "I made a mistake," she admitted softly. "I was so focused on what I wanted that I forgot how much you've done for us. I thought I could just build something new, but this house is home because of you." The words hit me harder than I expected. I had prepared myself for arguments, excuses, even silence, but not this. Not her coming back with her heart in her hands. She continued, "I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know if I deserve to." I let the silence stretch between us, but it wasn't heavy this time. It was the kind of silence that held room for healing if both sides were willing. I finally spoke, my voice low but steady. "I don't need you to beg. I just need you to remember who I am. I'm your father. And this house, it's not just mine. It's a legacy. One day it'll be yours. But you can't treat me like I don't belong here." She nodded slowly, tears streaming down now, no longer hidden. "I know. And I'm sorry." For a long time we just sat there. No shouting, no defenses. Just a father and a daughter, facing the hurt between them. She looked around the house again, then back at me. "Can we come back?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I took a breath. I'd always dreamed of having this house full of family again, of laughter filling the rooms like it once did. But I also wasn't the same man I'd been before. Something inside me had changed too. I wasn't going to be invisible again. I wasn't going to let kindness be misunderstood as weakness. I said, "You can come back, but things are going to be different."
I'm not going to be pushed aside. I'm not going to live like I'm a burden in my own home. If this house is going to have family in it, then it's going to have respect too." She nodded quickly, like she'd been waiting for the chance to make it right. "I'll make sure of it. I promise." For the first time in a long while, I felt warmth return to my chest, not because everything was fixed, but because the door to healing had finally opened. That night, after she left to talk to her husband and the kids, I stepped out onto the porch. The evening air was cool. The oak tree swayed gently in the breeze, and the house felt less cold. My wife always said that family can break your heart, but it's also what puts it back together. I whispered softly into the night, "We're not done yet." And for the first time since it all began, I believed it.
I stood in the middle of the living room, my hands tucked into my worn cardigan pockets, looking at the faces of the people who had once called me their foundation. My daughter sat on the couch, pale and shaking, her husband beside her looking like he wanted to disappear. My grandson leaned against the staircase, his eyes darting between us, confused but not entirely surprised. The truth I had just laid bare still lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. "I didn't mean for it to get to this point," my daughter finally whispered, her voice cracking. I thought we needed the space. I thought—" "You thought wrong," I said quietly. Not to wound her, but because I needed her to finally face reality. This house isn't just a place with walls and a roof. It's my blood, my sweat, and the years of my life. You grew up here, remember? You ran through these hallways, you cried on those stairs, and you laughed in that kitchen. This isn't some temporary stop on your way up. This is home, and it was mine long before it was ever yours." She lowered her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. For years, I'd been the one cleaning up after everyone else. I paid the bills in silence, fixed the leaking pipes in the winter, repaired the broken steps in the spring, and kept the lights on no matter what. And yet, she had tried to push me out like an unwanted guest. Her husband cleared his throat, clearly unsure how to navigate this storm. "We didn't mean to—" "Yes, you did," I interrupted. "You meant every word when you told me it was time to go. You didn't ask, you didn't discuss, you told me." My daughter looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. "I was overwhelmed. Things have been hard, and I thought having the house to ourselves would make it easier. I didn't think—" She trailed off, realizing how flimsy her excuses sounded now that everything was out in the open. I walked slowly toward the mantel where old family photos lined up like silent witnesses. There was one of her as a little girl, sitting on my shoulders at the beach. I remember that day like it was yesterday. The way she had begged for ice cream, the way she clung to me when the waves came too close. She used to think I was her hero. Somewhere along the way, that little girl had grown into a woman who thought her father was a burden. "I didn't raise you to be cruel," I said, my voice lower now, steadier. "I raised you to have a heart, to remember where you came from. But somewhere you forgot. And if I hadn't spoken up, you would have pushed me out without even blinking." She started to sob, covering her face with both hands. For a moment, the room was quiet, except for the sound of her crying and the distant ticking of the old clock on the wall. Then my grandson stepped forward. His voice was soft but firm. "Mom, you can't just kick Grandpa out. He's family. He's always been here. He's the reason we have this house in the first place." Her eyes widened, as if she had forgotten her own son was standing there through it all. I turned to him, and a lump formed in my throat. "Thank you, kiddo." He nodded, looking determined. "I'm not letting you leave, Grandpa. Not now, not ever." Her husband put a hand on her shoulder, but it was clear even he wasn't going to defend her this time. She took a deep, shaky breath. "I was wrong. I was selfish. I let everything get to me, and I took it out on you. I can't fix what I said, but please don't hate me."
I exhaled slowly. I'd spent years biting my tongue to keep the peace, always trying to shield her from the harshness of life. But sometimes, love means telling the truth that hurts. I don't hate you, I said gently. But you needed to learn that love isn't about convenience. It's about respect. And respect means knowing who stood for you when no one else did. She crossed the room hesitantly, and then suddenly she was hugging me tightly, like she used to when she was small and scared of thunderstorms. I felt her shaking against my chest, and my arms slowly wrapped around her. It wasn't forgiveness yet, not fully, but it was a start. We stood like that for what felt like forever. When she finally pulled away, her face was blotchy and wet, but her eyes were clearer than I'd seen them in years. "I want you to stay," she whispered, "not because you own this house, because you're my dad, and I love you." I gave a tired but genuine smile. I'm not going anywhere, but things are going to change. From now on, I won't just be the man who quietly fixes everything behind the scenes. I'll be the man who reminds you what family means. Her husband nodded quickly, almost too eager to agree. My grandson smiled wide, and for the first time in months, the tension in the house seemed to lift. Later that night, I sat in my favorite armchair by the fireplace, the house quiet again. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the hurt, and the revelation. But I also thought about how it ended, not with me packing my bags, but with my daughter finally seeing me, truly seeing me again. I knew trust would take time to rebuild, but this house wasn't just made of bricks and wood. It was built with years of sacrifice, love, and memories, and no one, not even my own daughter, could erase that. I looked up at the old clock again, its hands ticking steadily forward. Life has a way of circling back, of testing you just when you think the hardest days are behind. But I'd been through tougher battles, and I wasn't going to be silent anymore. This was my home, my legacy, and this time, they finally understood that.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.